this PCG video is going to be a little bit different than my usual, as it's not going to be a step-by-step tutorial, but I want to show you how I use PCG to make an actual environment. The tools I make, what they do, and how I use it all together. But if you do like this style, please let me know, of course, in the comments below. But if you also want to see a more step-by-step tutorial for anything I show, of course, also put it down in the comments. So with that, let's get into it. Everything you see here has been created with PCG in terms of the layout. The floating islands over there, the platform I have here, this breakup, the spawning of these rocks, all done through PCG. The randomization of these trees is done with PCG. Again, floating islands. Some stuff is manually placed. Like for example, the statues here, that is manually placed. These kind of spider eggs are placed with PCG. So some things are a little more manual, like placing of the spider web locations, but pretty much all of this is done through PCG because it just makes it considerably simpler. And that includes all of these roads, so the paths where they go, where this one is nice and solid. There's also a broken up one here. And not only does this PCG actually set up all of the environment and everything, it also automatically puts blocking volumes where it needs to. So that way I can't actually walk off anywhere in these locations. If I get out of game mode here, you can see there's our blocking volumes. So it spawns one all around the edge, but really it spawns it only where I need to, because you can see the ones here don't have it. It is controlled by a volume where I can specify where I want these blocking volumes. So if I want to, I can remove them from certain areas or only add them to certain areas. But basically, how is this all set up? The floor is the most complicated part because basically I have different materials here. And you can see I have other splines on top here that are creating the path. So for example, I have another spline here that is swapping the blocks of the ground with a path. So I can move this around and automatically update. I can have as many of them as I want, of course, so I can add more or less. This one is on a diagonal, which is why it's broken up. If I was to rotate this a bit, you'll see it is back to being a solid line. But if I have it rotated, it starts breaking up. I'll show you why and get into the PCG graph itself shortly. I just want to explain kind of the overall first, so you kind of know what to expect the graph. Same thing with this kind of center circle area. This area is another setup just like the other one, but it's swapping out for a different stone. And this one, as you can see, also spawns in decals. So basically, wherever this is, it has a chance of spawning decals to kind of break things up a little bit. Now, the amount of decals here is, I think, a little bit too high. We probably need to adjust that, but this is kind of where we left off. So let me show you how this floor is set up first. So this is my PCG graph of the floor. It is more or less relatively simple. It has the get spline data to get the main path area using a simple spline sampler. And then effectively, I have these different blueprints that I'm actually spline sampling, which are these guys here, right? It's the floor one, it's the stone circle that I can, of course, make into any shape I want. So basically sampling the different ones. I'm using the same distance for all of these samples because the actual blocks are 100 by 100 roughly. All of these are set to 100 by 100 sample. I'm slightly tweaking them, and basically I'm cutting out those paths from the actual original main area. And then effectively I'm inverting that difference. So I am left with just the points that do intersect with these. But the main thing here, I'm leaving it on minimum, not on binary. For example, this is the main path. As you can see here, we have this broke up version because it's angled. If I change this difference node to binary, you'll see that we get considerably different result. So by leaving it on minimum, I get a far more interesting setup. Now, I don't typically use minimum in my setups that you've seen previously on the channel. That's because usually I want to specifically just remove it. This is more done in a creative way. So I have things that don't need to be perfectly in line, and it's a little more forgiving in terms of what I can get away with and what I can't. A lot of times when I'm removing points, I want to specifically remove them. Definitely remove them from this area. In this case, this is what I want. So that is why this one is set to minimum, and all of them are. But as you can see, basically, if I debug the difference here, you can see it has a little bit of overlapping here, which is why it's a little bit gray, and that's why we're getting this randomness. Because the points aren't fully cut out, it's not perfectly black, so that's why we're only cutting out when it's actually pure black. And then by doing a difference of the difference, right, we're getting the other section of it. So now we have what's remaining, again, with the variation of values. So at that point, I have random rotation. So for example, the path, I have rotating in 90-degree increments. So that way we have a little bit of variation for each piece. So all that's done is by using an attribute noise, I'm randomizing between 0 and 3. Then I'm rounding it, so that way it's only integers going from 0 to 3, and then multiplying by 90 degrees, and effectively just setting rotation.yaw with this value. Then I have a little bit of variations here, and because there was a little bit of overlapping, as you saw when we sampled the spline, I'm removing the pieces of the original path from here. And that's how we end up in this situation. And I have one for the stone area, as well as the path and grass. I also have one for random blocks. I have a random blocks one, and same thing, it just goes through a difference node and cuts out things as needed. So this is relatively simple. It could be tidied up, of course. It's near the end of its development in terms of figuring out what I want and how much control I want. But the main thing here, I just wanted to show you how it's kind of set up to just take a grid of points effectively, and how do you customize it to give you the look you want. I do spawn dirt randomly here using a dirt ratio. So you can see all of these square dirt patches. If I didn't want to, I can go down into the PCG section and override the dirt ratio to be 0 if I wanted it off entirely. Or if I want to create an area of pure dirt, I can of course set it to 1. And now we have pure dirt. Or I had it at default is kind of where I was happy with, which is why I haven't actually overridden any of these values. But the interesting thing I can do here is I can enable a border. And if I turn that on, I get a border to the entire thing that spawns a different type of cube and has a little bit of height variation. So if I was to go ahead and play, you can see here it is. Nice little border. So I can have it in areas, and I can cut it out as I need to. So I have a volume here that's called a wall remover, and then just wherever it is, I remove the wall. So if I don't want a wall in a certain area, I can just go ahead and remove it. This is so that if I want to enclose an area, I can, but if I want to take one island and another island and kind of put them right next to each other, and I don't want a wall, of course, in between, I can just cut that part out. You can also do it the opposite way, where you put in the walls where you're overlapping. That thing, that's just some personal preference depending how you kind of work. In my case, I thought this would be the best way, since I can already make a custom like long pathway on a single floor level. I don't need to actually combine the full floors, just like have it mix and merge perfectly automatically. This is fine. I'm perfectly content with this. The final thing is these blocking volumes. Now I had to make my own custom one. Unfortunately, I could not spawn the default blocking volumes and actually set them up to be correct within PCG. It seems some things are just an editor, and the values are only accessible in C++, so I couldn't overwrite. So because of that, I made my own, which is just a simple box collision with the collision preferences set up the way I want. And effectively, all I'm doing is taking the main area, doing my offset to get the border, the same one I've always done, and then making it so it only appears where it's overlapping the blueprint that I created. They're all just basically volumes or splines that I'm using for all of these overlap ones. In this case, it's a volume, and assuming that it's overlapping, go ahead and spawn them and just scale them up in height and offset them a little bit. And so we're left with a perfect grid here that lines up with the border, so I don't have to manually plug in all of these things. Turn off the border, you can see, right, it's all lines up exactly. So no need for manual placing. Now, I would love for it to be a little bit cleaner, but it gets the job done, and I don't have to worry about spawning these where I don't want to. But that pretty much takes care of all of these areas. And you can see we have a skull here, which is actually done completely by accident, because as I showed, it does break things up when you do diagonals. So by rotating it 90 degrees, it has created the shape. If I go ahead and move it, you'll get a different pattern. And the pattern is pretty cool because it's almost mirrored. As I move it around, here's another skull, here's another skull. So depending on how you position this, you can get a lot of skulls or a lot of this shape pretty much wherever you'd like, or a few others, of course. From there, I've gone ahead and made some trees. Now the trees are extremely simple. The blueprint doesn't even have a spline or anything. It just has the PCG graph, and the PCG graph, as simple as it gets, it just checks itself and either spawns green shrubs or not based on the property that I set to it. So in here, you can see I have green shrubs as a checkbox. I turn it on and it swaps to the green tree versions. If I go ahead and move it, it'll randomize between the green trees and it'll randomize the size and the rotation. So I don't have to worry about randomizing too much. But if I'm happy with the tree, but it's a little bit too small or too big, I can still go ahead and just scale it or keep it as is and go back to the red tree version. And that's all I did. I just placed that tree around basically as a randomized static mesh. Nothing super fancy. I placed these around where it kind of made sense on the floating islands and everything. Next thing on the ground here is the rocks. And again, this one's also really simple. This is just a regular spline area here, just like before. Regular spline sampler, cut out a bunch of points based on the ratio I want to keep. The only difference is it raycasts down onto the other points. And one thing to note here is in the world raycast, unfiltering, I had to disable self hits. Even though they're separate systems, for some reason, self hits would ignore the other PCG graph. It is not itself, so I'm not sure why. But if you run into issues trying to world raycast from one PCG graph to another, even when they're separate, try turning that off. It seems to have fixed the issue for me. It's possible to fix it as well for you. That's pretty much all it is for the rocks, right? I can just go ahead and just increase the rock amount if I so wish, and it's a spline, so I can put it into any shape. I could have made this in one piece. For convenience though, because I wasn't sure what I was going to do, I made this just be 4 sections of rock just to kind of put rocks around the area. Then we have the area down below, which again is same like the others, is just another spline spawning things around. The only difference is this one has a few settings exposed. You can have it be hollow or solid. So if I wanted it to be solid, like if I needed to see through it, I could. I can change the spacing, I can change the scale, randomness. So if I wanted to be really tall, I can make it tall. And the reason why I have it option for hollow and not hollow, even though you typically won't see it from above when it's going down, is because I could, if I wanted to, flip this the other way and have this be a mountain range. And so maybe I'll want to have a thick area of rocks here or anything like that. I can just go ahead and turn off hollow. It also allows me to have effectively a one thin area, because without it, you can see this is a one thin area of rock. But if I turned on the hollow again, then this will guarantee 2, because there still goes along the spline instead of the interior. So this allows me to have a one thick and have very thick walls. Now, if you're thinking that, well, it's cool, it's all one platform, so you kind of have to make a very flat world, you don't. I actually did make a PCG graph for stairs. Now, I'm not using stairs in this one, but I can show it off. If I bring in my blueprint from stairs here, you can see I got a little stair here. I can move it around, I can rotate it, do whatever I want, and there's our stair. Now, it's not very exciting. So if I go into the PCG component, I can specify the width and the height here. So I can specify I want it to be 3 wide. For example, there's our 3 wide. And how high up do I want it? Let's say 5 up, and it will automatically make the stairs 5 high, and it will put some supports on the sides. I can make it 2 high, 8 high, whatever I'd like. I have the control to just plug in the values that I want, and it'll go ahead and randomize the stairs. As you can see, stairs are fully randomized, and we have this nice cubic border here. Now, it does intersect. It has a little bit of randomness to it, but it still, I think, looks fine, and it fits with the fact that everything here is also cubic grids. Yeah, not using it in this setup, but I do have stairs, so we can go from platform to platform, which is why sometimes I might want to turn on the borders, and sometimes I'll want to be able to just maybe hop down to a lower level when I don't want to use the stairs. One of the final things I want to show is kind of those floating islands, because they're really simple to make. If I wanted to make a floating island, all I would need to go is go into the top view, and you think I would drag out the floor and kind of adjust the spline, but no, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to change the selection mode to modeling, and under create, I'm going to select draw spline. In here, I'm going to make it a loop and change empty actor to create blueprint. And I'm going to have it specify my blueprint sky grid floor. So the main floor that I'm using here. And it's going to override the spline in there with the one I want. All I'm going to do is change the draw mode to free draw. And in my case, I'm going to change the spacing to 500 because I found that to be quite nice. So now if I want to go ahead and draw a graph here, I'll just left click and just draw. And I can make this whatever shape I want, and then I'll just let go and then hit accept. And there you go. And there's our island, just like that. And if I want, I can go back to draw spline, swap it out to the cliff, make it a loop again, and then draw a different spline here that kind of goes around, and then hit accept. And you can see there's our other spline. Now it does put the pivot point for some reason up in the air. I'm not sure why, but the basics of it are like so. That's simple to create kind of randomized floating islands or unique shapes. Of course, from here, I would recommend going through and actually cleaning up some of these splines, making them a little more interesting, especially for the ground here, right? This is like a big curve. Maybe you want to have it a little more in, a little more out. You can go in and customize from here now that you can actually see it. And maybe you want to have this out. Maybe you want to have this connect through and have this go very close this way, right? You can customize it from here, but the main graph here was very easily created. So now we can have another floating island if so wish. And from here, we just go ahead and scatter a bunch of rocks or anything else we want, or customize this island's settings. So we can go in and say, hey, give this one a border and make this one mostly dirt. So maybe this is a farming area. Now we can tweak the spacing of the rocks, make them a little bit bigger, and we have something a little more interesting. Relatively simply, honestly, to create lots of different variations using this. I get asked a lot about these complex PCG graphs, but in reality and in practicality, I typically create very small, very generic PCG graphs that kind of help me with my workflow. I don't create one graph that does everything. That doesn't give me the control that I want. I want to be able to specify, hey, on this one, I want more rocks. On this one, I want less rocks. I want more dirt, less dirt. I want to specify specify where I put the statue, specify where I put the trees. I started as an environment artist, and those kind of controls to me are important, which is why I don't want it to be placed automatically for me. Yes, you could go in and make it advanced enough where it does everything for you the way you'd want, but I have a lot of fun in creating environments. So I don't want to do it all automatically. It might look okay, but once I want to start tweaking it and fiddling with it, it just doesn't do it for me. This though is great, and it's relatively simple setup. But like I said, if you want me to go in depth on how I created any part of this or all of this, please let me know in the comments, and I'll happily make a tutorial on whatever you'd like. The stairs, the floors, whatever it is, you just have to ask. But with that, I want to give a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You help support me and do the things that I enjoy, such as this. And if you'd like, you can join the community Discord linked in the description below, as always. And if you're looking for an actual PCG tutorial to watch next to start learning how to do some of this stuff, check out this video right over here to get your PCG journey started.